what has been the biggest moment of doubt for you in your career?
It takes quite a toll on your personal life, as this week you're in New York and 2 weeks later you're in Singapore. It does well on your Instagram, but it doesn't work well for the birthdays that you miss.
Robert Kraal, former COO of Adyen and co-founder of Silverflow, the company reinventing the engine behind card payments. 1 billion transactions per year, 15% growth month over month. This is his story.
I've always been looking to understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I've always looked at why are these rules there? And in my mind, in many cases, the rules are sort of created boundaries. Well, why are they created? If I couldn't see that reason, then I would say, okay, listen, let's see if we can reshape those boundaries.
Many companies and entrepreneurs have a vision. When is it enough?
We always jokingly say we want to have world dominance. But there's a little bit reality in the case we want to have the best acquired processing platform. Then you sort of say, okay, yeah, but what does it mean? You try to put some sort of metrics around it.
But sometimes it can feel very empty to just have those numbers.
For me personally, work is also fun.
Why? What's driving you?
Ambition.
Can we unpack that? Robert, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's immediately dive into it. You started as a geophysicist, but ended up in payments because a friend called you and the oil price crashed. At Bibit, you helped build the first global payment service provider in the world and sold it to RBS/WorldPay. The code still might be running somewhere.
Yeah, I always make that joke. But I'm not 100% sure if it's true, but it could be true.
Could be true. As a COO of Adyen, you built the acquiring and processing department from scratch.
Yeah.
Which is the infrastructure that made Adyen great.
Yeah.
In 2016, you left 2 years before the IPO to become COO of My Tomorrows. There you help patients gain access to medicines not yet officially approved, but which do have clinical data. And it's actually as far as away you can get from payments as possible, actually.
Well, yeah, there's one similarity. It's both very heavily regulated.
Heavily regulated. Okay, that's
heavily
your passion
regulated.
then. Okay, good to know.
That was the passion. Well,
we'll dive into that later.
Yeah.
Fast forward, 2019, co-founder of Silverflow.
Yeah.
3 years of building before go live.
Yeah.
And now 1 billion of transactions per year, 50 clients, 95 people, and 15% month over month growth.
Yeah.
Looking back on your entrepreneurship, which decision ultimately had the most influence on where you are today?
I think that one is a bit difficult. One that is very important is, I think, the choice for Bibit back in the days, which was an unusual choice. So, of course, I studied geophysics, so you end up in the oil gas industry. But I chose something else because one of my friends asked me to say, hey, would you like to join our little startup? Which at that moment, by the way, was not even a payment startup. But that became a payment startup. So that is, of course, a very important choice because otherwise I probably would be doing something else entirely different than payments.
Okay.
The other important step is, I guess, the tremendous success of particular Adyen.
Yeah.
Where you've been involved in starting early as a company and really growing out to a massive company. It's similar to what we did at Bibit, but of course at Bibit we sort of didn't manage to grow it that big because it was already sold before it could get that big. And WorldPay at this moment is a huge company as well. But definitely the experience at Adyen is a very valuable experience where you learn everything about setting up a company, growing it, investors, but setting up the operations team, expanding to different countries, etc. So that's been an enormous learning school.
But if you really would need to pick one decision, what would be the decision?
Then probably still the most important decision was to actually start in this internet company, early days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you tell me more about that decision? Take me to that moment.
Well, I finished my study geophysics, and you expect a certain role that you get. So that you've studied very hard, learned lots of complex stuff, and I actually got quite a nice job in the sense of it was good paid, it was a management function, etc. But I thought it was extremely boring what I was doing. So you could argue, it's a good job, and other people might have liked it. But
what made it boring for you?
It was boring because when you're studying, you use your brains essentially. And this job, I had to be early in on the job, which by itself is fine. It was a field job, so essentially reassessing the size of a big gas field.
Mm-hmm.
And the crew starts early. They start early. So before that, you must have to make sure that you send out the right instructions to the crew. What do you need to do today, and what do I expect? And then essentially nothing happens that much until the crew comes back at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And they come back with their data and their proof points and their maps and their stuff. And they have another 1 or 2 hours of analyzing that, making sure that the data indeed was recorded, there were no mistakes, etc. Sort of basic quality control, etc. And that was sort of your day. And the rest of the day, you were not doing that much, to be quite honest. So we had our 4x4, so you can go and look at the crew, how they were working. Fair enough, that is funny to do that
one day.
But if you every day just without any reason drive around in your 4x4, and when that project was finished, I got offered another project which would be sort of 8 months, and it was in Siberia at that moment.
Okay.
And I thought, do I want to do exactly? I would love to go and see Siberia, but do I want to do exactly this? And then without even having a village in the neighborhood, just living out of containers for 8 months for a lot of money. And I said, well, no, that's not what I really wanted. But that's also the moment that one of my buddies that I knew from studying said, hey, why don't you come? And me and my brother just set up a company. Why don't you come and join here? We're roughly doing this. We were in the billing space at that moment. So we believed that people would pay for content. If you read one article in your newspaper, why can't you just buy that one article? Why do you always have to buy the full newspaper?
Yeah.
And this is pre-2000, so 99. And we built a system for doing that. And at the end of the month, the consumer would get sort of an invoice saying you've consumed 10 articles on the Telegraaf and 5 on the NRC and 12 on the Parool. And you also got some real-time stock advices, and you called the NS or you checked the NS website for some paper use. So really small, lots of small amounts. And at the end of the month, the consumer would get an invoice, and we would collect that. Please transfer this amount to the bank account, and we would split it back to the content provider, so to the newspapers or the other content providers. And by itself, that worked. But at that moment, people didn't really bothered about getting paid for the content. Content was free, and it was subsidized by commercials or other types of ads. So it didn't really pick up that model. And that was more the content billing, so the counting the number of articles that you've read. But we had this little simple payment module attached to it. And we got a few customers saying, well, we're not selling content, we're selling books or flowers. Can't we use that payment module? And that's essentially the moment that we moved from this billing provider, which actually was called Bibit Billing Provider at that moment, to the first payment service providers. And we focused from that moment on making that payment process quicker, easier, smoother, from that moment on. So that is how I rolled into the payments. And I think that is a very important moment, definitely for where I am now. If I didn't have that moment, I probably would be doing something else.
Yeah, exactly. But if we just go back to making that decision to join your friend and his brother.
Yeah.
Because what I'm hearing is, so you were doing something that was in line with what you studied.
Yeah, absolutely.
Earning a good salary.
Yeah, absolutely.
But unhappy.
Yeah, it didn't give me the fulfillment that I expected. And
did you ever, let's say, when taking that leap, let's say, think like, should I do this because I did all these studies, I'm earning a great salary, and now I'm going to do...
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. So there's another consideration. At that moment, the oil price was roughly at $10.
Okay.
And that means that the type of project that I would do, so finding oil or gas in the field, that there would be, in general, a little bit less budget for that. That's also the reason why my next job would be in Siberia and not in a nice tropical island, for instance. So I also had something like, well, does it hurt if I do this for 1 or 2 years? Maybe the oil price go back and I can get sort of the type of job that I really wanted. And I myself wasn't too worried about it, but you can imagine that you have to explain to your parents, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to join a startup. Oh, great. In your own business? No, something completely different. So I think that was much more the discussion that I had. For me, I sort of like, well, I like this, nice people. I understand what we're doing. I don't know where it's going because we didn't, let's be fair. But it sounds like a cool adventure. Yeah. So that was more my take on that.
And if you look back on this with the knowledge you have today, what will be the lesson that you learned from that decision making back then?
Well, I think, of course, it's stepping a little bit outside of your comfort zone. So you studied one thing, and This is different. Yeah, it's completely different.
Yeah, totally
there are
different.
a few similarities if you want to go, but because it's very technical and you need to be a little bit exact in terms of being able to work with amounts and numbers or those type of things. But for the rest, it's very difficult. Well, there's a part of programming in my education, so that was quite handy in the early days of Bibit as well. But for the rest, it's completely different. For me, I think the lesson is that or the advice is don't be afraid to step out of your comfort zone. It's not bad if you do something else than what you studied for. It's good if you select something that you like and where you can find your enthusiasm in.
Yeah, nice. If we then fast forward to Silverflow.
Yeah.
Can you take me to the moment that the idea for Silverflow really came about? Where were you? What triggered it?
Yeah, well, the idea for Silverflow actually comes, of course, from my experience at Adyen.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to take you back a little bit to what I did at Adyen. So at Adyen, when we started Adyen, we wanted to build a payment service provider in the more traditional sense, similar to many of the other payment service providers back in those days. But also, new regulation was introduced in Europe, the Payment Service Directive. And all payment service providers were required to become compliant. And that's mostly to do with being able to hold money temporarily, to accept it from your consumers, hold it temporarily and pass it on to the retailers. And with that comes sort of know your customer process.
Yeah.
Who am I really doing this for? But also processes such as anti-money laundering. And you have to make sure that you control that process. So initially it was seen a little bit as a burden for all those payment service providers because suddenly they had to do things that they didn't have to do before. But it also allowed other types of functionality to become available for those payment service providers. And I just went through that process as my previous company, Doc Data Payments. Was a stock listed company, or it was a daughter of Doc Data, which is a stock listed company. So we had to be compliant pretty soon. So when I joined Adyen, we were not compliant yet. One of my tasks as a CEO, of course, is to make sure that we are compliant. So that is the normal process, setting up the teams to do that. But I also said in the team, I said, listen, I think that based on this new regulation, we can buy our credit card transactions directly from Visa and MasterCard. And I'm not sure if everybody knows that. Normally, in that time, we would buy our Visa MasterCard transactions from the banks. So we'd go to any of the Dutch banks or of the international banks and say, okay, we want to buy a credit card transaction. What does it cost? And we would put a little margin on top of that, and that's how we would sell it. But of course, the bank makes money out of that.
Yeah.
So we said, okay, if we want to cut out the margin that the bank makes, how can we do that? Well, buy in those transactions directly from Visa MasterCard.
And this was possible due to PSD?
We didn't know that yet at that moment.
Okay.
We didn't know that at that moment, but I thought with what I knew already and say, okay, I think that they cannot really refuse us to give us those licenses. So I said, let me sort of start testing and contacting the card networks and see how that works. And yeah, to be quite honest, at that moment, the card networks were also not aware that this could happen. So they were not prepared for having these type of applications. Normally, they only worked with banks. And they had as a requirement, you need to have a banking license, otherwise we cannot help you.
Yeah.
And now the landscape changed, and they did not really have the immediate response to how this would work. So it took a little while to push the card networks, and also to convince the central bank, who was a regulator, the Dutch central bank here in the Netherlands, to get those licenses. It's not really a contract in the sense that you have normal buyer-vendor contracts. You become part of this organization, so it's a membership. And
what's the difference?
Well, with a contract you can negotiate.
Yeah.
So I always compare it with the tennis club. You're a member of the tennis club, and what they could say, if you play tennis here, you behave in the bar.
Yeah.
For instance.
Yeah.
And if you play tennis here once every month, you have to have bar duty or cleanup duty or whatever. We expect that you do something for that. And some tennis clubs are even more strict, and they say you have to wear white tennis clothes and white shoes and no long whatever. But you cannot negotiate that. You cannot go to the tennis club and say, if I pay a little bit more, can I misbehave at the bar?
Yeah.
That's not part of, let's say, the membership. The membership is just you become a member and all the rules apply to every member. That's sort of with Visa and MasterCard as well. So you become member of the club, and there are certain things, rules that you need to comply with. But the rules are essentially the same for everybody. You cannot say, if I pay a little bit more, can I get a little bit more out of that?
Yeah.
Or if I have more volume, do I get a discount compared to the others? Which in normal negotiations you could go.
Yeah, exactly.
You can actually negotiate on those terms. And with the card networks, it's not possible, although of course there are certain advantages for very large acquirers. So to become a member, you have to show that you're compliant with all their rules and regulation, that you understand the game. We got that. But if you are a member, you're allowed to trade with them. But you also need to be able to send, from a technical perspective, the transactions to them, to actually communicate with them.
Yeah.
And there are specialized companies who do this. And they're called acquirer processors. And we looked at that moment, so we're still talking about Adyen time, at all the acquirer processors that were in the market at that moment.
Yeah.
And we put the pluses and the minuses. What do we like? What don't we like? What are different cost elements? And the summary was, well, there's nobody who really matches what we want to do. And at that moment, Adyen still was a small acquirer, or non-existing acquirer, essentially. We were a member, but not an acquirer yet. So we also didn't have the size to actually request something back from those providers.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why I said, okay, why don't we build it ourselves? And that's been a part of my journey at Adyen, making sure that we will build out that acquirer proposition in terms of the licensing with Visa, MasterCard, relation with those card networks, and of course also the other cards. And also the technology. How do we, from a technical point of view? Your question was, where does the idea from Silverflow come from?
Exactly.
Well, it's sort of this problem that we're exactly solving ourselves. So after I left Adyen, of course, your mind is still in payment mode, and you're sort of thinking, what are other things in payments that could happen? And we thought more payment service providers will follow the Adyen route. So they will be looking to become a member of Visa, MasterCard, instead of buying in their card transactions from their bank. And this is not just a Dutch thing. It's a European thing because of the Payment Service Directive, which of course applies in all the EU countries anyhow.
Yeah.
But we also noticed that other countries, think of many countries in Southeast Asia or LATAM or Middle East Africa, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, were also changing their financial regulations in a similar format. So we're expecting more companies wanting to become an acquirer, want to become a member of Visa, MasterCard. And we figured out that all those companies will go through the same journey. So they will look at the existing players. They probably would look at, well, they don't really do what we want. They might look at building it themselves, but having first-hand experience, I know how complex it is to build.
Yeah.
So some companies can do that if you're big enough, for sure. But we also thought, okay, what company is missing then? Why don't they choose for another company that already does it for them? And that is sort of the niche where we originally put ourselves. So we're helping those payment service providers who want to become a member of Visa, MasterCard. Well, they need to do their own contracting, membership, compliance, all the procedures around it themselves. That is purely for them to do themselves. But they also do need technology. And in most of the cases, they want modern technology. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, if you have the choice.
If you have the choice. And they have the choice, because they have a greenfield. They don't have any legacy stuff yet.
Yeah.
For them, it's new. So if you start, then you want to work with sort of the most modern processing platform. And that's what we've built.
I think it's really important to also understand who you are as a person.
Okay.
So my question is, what will be a moment in your early life or career that has formed you the most to the person that's sitting opposite of me?
Ooh. Well, I think that certain elements have already been in me for a long time.
Okay.
So I like to understand things. So really deep dive into how things really work. But I think when I was very young, I was more a little bit a shy boy, you could almost say.
Okay. Can you take me to a moment?
Yeah, well, I was definitely at preschool. I was just like the good, normal young kid until I probably got like 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. I got a little bit more rebellious. I said, well, there are certain rules here, particularly the rules of my parents. I said, well, I don't necessarily like all of them. So you start to become a little bit of a rebel. So you, on the one side, you still want to understand how things work, but on the other side, you have an opinion about how to shape your own space. Yeah. Essentially what you do when you're, I think, an adolescent, like 14, 15, depends a bit on the age, but that you sort of say, but now it's time to create my own space. And I think that from that moment on, I took more and more direction of who I wanted to be, where I wanted to be in that space. And of course, if you set up a company, or if you work in these type of companies, which I've done from a very young age, I've always felt that we were reshaping the world a little bit. So, of course, there was the status quo of banks dominating the payments market. And let's say when we started early days, most of the stores were traditional brick and mortar retail stores. let's change the world. Let's make solutions for e-commerce stores. Let's see how we can do that. And let's change a little bit the way how which companies have which roles. So which roles does a bank have? Create our own role, essentially. Why is there a need for a payment service provider? And later on at Adyen, change the rules again. Why don't we become an acquirer ourselves? And later on, Adyen, of course, became a bank as well, themselves as well. So it's constantly sort of trying to change the boundaries of your own playing field, and that applies for me as a person as well.
But can you make this turn it into a real life example that shaped your thinking that this now is important to you? So if we could bring it back. So what was an example that you needed to shape your own when you were young?
Yeah, well, I think what I mentioned when I was 15, 16 or so, I needed to have more space.
Like what?
Like what, yeah. What time do you get home? Those type of things, but also sort of, you have your first girlfriend, and when is she allowed to sleep at your parents' house, for instance, and when are you staying over at her house? Those type of things, they changed my view of there are boundaries apparently, but I don't get those boundaries. I don't understand them. And if I don't understand the boundaries, let's change them. But that applies to a degree also at school itself, at your first jobs, that you sort of say, okay, we're doing this job this way. Well, when you're 16, 17 years old, you don't really have very fancy jobs, but sometimes you get a job and say, well, this probably is not the smartest way to do the job. And you make those changes, and you try to make those changes. So I think there's not really one big example, but I've always been looking to understand what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I've always looked at why are these rules there? And in my mind, in many cases, the rules are sort of created boundaries. Well, why are they created? Is there a good reason for it? And then the next thing, if I couldn't see that reason, that I would say, okay, listen, let's see if we can reshape those boundaries. Let's see if we can shape the view of that. Why is this normal and that not normal? And why can't a payment service provider be an acquirer? Yeah, that's again back to the business. Or why can't I move from geophysics?
No, exactly. But for me, it clicks. What you're saying right now makes it come to life in a way. And now I also much better understand why you were the right person at the right time for Adyen to go directly to MasterCard Visa.
Yeah.
Because the rules as they were not necessarily the right rules anymore. And you were the person to, and most likely with more, but try to find a way, is this still the way it should be?
Yeah, but I think that many entrepreneurs should have that type of view.
Yeah.
That you should sort of say, okay, I want to solve this solution. Why is it not solved? Well, usually it's not solved because of rules, barriers. And the question is, are they real rules and barriers, or are it just people who sort of created that for themselves and don't know, because they've been too long in this business that they don't know how to change anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that doesn't apply just for me. I think that a lot of people at Adyen, definitely in the early days, they had the same view, and many entrepreneurs and typically entrepreneurs in, let's say, technical innovation, I would say, even in the broader sense, but also in the pharmaceutical innovation, that what drives them is change. I don't accept the solution that is there today. It's not a good solution. I think I can improve it.
Yeah.
And you have to have that conviction and know a little bit which direction you want to improve it. And there will be barriers, because otherwise, if it would be easy, somebody else would have fixed it already.
Yeah, exactly. It would exist already.
Yeah, exactly.
The solution would be there. Yeah, 100%. Then, actually going back to, now we already discussed a bit about Adyen. But what I'm also curious about is, you left in 2016.
Yep.
This is 2 years before IPO.
Yep.
I've worked at 2 unicorns myself. Both haven't IPO'd yet. But one thing I know is that many people tend to stick around until IPO.
Yeah.
Or at least until the potential IPO, because you never know upfront. It's not as if 5 years ahead of time it's going to IPO in 5 years or 3 years, whatever. What is your take on that, given that you left 2 years before?
Well, it's very simple. When you do an IPO, you sort of select which people do you want to have for the IPO round. And you discuss with those people and say, listen, we're going public, and we ask you to stay at least until the IPO.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it has impact. But also typically, you don't want people to leave immediately after the IPO. So there was also the question to say, okay, listen, but we also want you to stay for at least another 4 years after the IPO. And that was 6 years. And at that moment I so like, do I really want to commit for another 6 years?
Yeah.
And the answer was, yeah, I might not. So that's the reason why we left in very good relation, by the way. Yeah. So and that's also the reason why I spent 2 years in the pharma technology, because there was also the kind request and say, listen, we would like you not to set up what you've done here at Adyen for other companies.
Okay.
So just to avoid any doubts, you're not gonna work for another payment company which is close or remotely close, just complete different industry.
Yeah, because that was actually going to be my next question, because then you indeed moved to health tech.
Yeah.
Something totally different.
Well, I'd been so long in the payments itself, so and there was also sort of like, okay, please don't go work for a direct competitor, which I totally understand. And then the question is, so what you gonna do? And my take at that moment was that the whole pharmaceutical industry had, in particular pharma tech, was not so big at that moment. It's a different market and there's not so much innovation. And this particular business idea appealed to me. So we thought that people will use the internet much more after they've been diagnosed with a disease. So typically people do a lot of self-doctoring. Hey, I've got a headache, didn't sleep. Well, you get the most awful diseases to you. Usually don't believe them. Go to your doctor to find a good diagnose. But there is a moment that people actually do get like a real diagnose from a real medical doctor or an expert and a second opinion. You have this disease. And what most people do, and particularly the younger people, older people, they sort of have full reliance on their doctors and they completely trust that. But younger people, they will use the internet and they are becoming experts of their own disease. So they want to know everything. They're going to check the internet. They're going to read everything. They will read studies. They will look at different type of treatments and they will go back to their doctor and say, you've advised me treatment A. But I found there's another treatment called treatment B. And here are 2 reports. Treatment B is better. Please explain me why you choose for treatment A. And it could be because treatment B is not allowed in the country where that person is. So the answer could be, I'm explicitly saying could be, we will treat you with treatment A because that has been the approved treatment in your country. And we get compensated from the healthcare, insurers, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Your treatment B that you found, yes, it has been a fully approved treatment in another country, but not here yet. So you have to wait until it gets approved here. And we sort of said, okay, listen, this is like you're in an airplane and the airplane is crashing. You know that for sure. There is a parachute on the airplane, which could be your life-saving parachute. But on the parachute, it says you can't use it because this parachute has only been tested in the US and your plane is crashing above France. Yeah, would you take that parachute or not?
Of course.
Of course. And this is sort of what happens in developing new medicines as well. Typically, medicines are approved in one country or region first.
Yeah.
In many cases, US is among the first regions because it's, of course, a very big market with over 350 million people. So if you got it approved, you immediately have the access. It's also a developed market where people are prepared to pay a lot for the healthcare. So usually the US is one of the first regions where new drugs get approved. Quite often Europe follows. Sometimes Europe is in the lead, by the way. And there are a few other countries who have this as well. Think of Japan. And there are actually quite a few countries. It depends a bit on where these pharmaceutical companies want to launch first. But it could be that this medicine is first launched in the US and later in Europe. Well, what we thought at My Tomorrows is that if you happen to have the disease in Europe, it's about your life. You don't want to be bothered by that this parachute essentially has not been tested in the Netherlands yet.
Yeah.
You want to look at all the people that have been saved in the US with this particular model of parachutes. And you sort of say, well, if I don't take the parachutes, I know what's going to happen. I'm on a crashing plane.
Yeah.
So I don't care if this parachute has been tested in the Netherlands or not, or in France, wherever you're flying at that moment. I feel confident with the fact that this has been tested on a lot of people in the US already.
Yeah.
So this is sort of what we wanted to bring. So first of all, make sure that the information would be available to the people, and the people in this case are the patients, because they want to know. So, okay, these are the type of treatments that are anywhere across the globe for your disease, with some sort of a ranking, how many people were treated, what the results were, etc. The other one is, of course, help the doctors navigate in that as well. And you have to realize that many of the medical doctors, the specialists, they get so much reports to read, because there's so much research and so much new things. And they also have to treat their patients. And in average in the Netherlands, I think a specialist works 55 hours a week. And then at home, they should read all these reports. Well, I know they will read typically a few of the most prominent reports in their field, and particularly if it applies to them, because they're in the same region.
No, exactly.
Why would you become a specialist of all the research in the US if you are not able to treat with that? So quite often they don't know, and it's not that they don't want to, they just don't have the time to read all these reports.
When I hear you tell about this story, for me, this is again in the same space of breaking boundaries.
Exactly.
And rules that are there that you just don't understand, because they're, So there's a clear pattern.
Absolutely. It's something that you say, okay, why can't I use this parachute? Yeah, that's sort of like, it's a rule, and if you think about it, you don't really understand it, and particularly because it's in this case quite often about your life or your health.
Yeah.
Those are the boundaries that I'm talking about, and say, okay, change the playing field a little bit.
Yeah, I also understand now, because I read somewhere that one of your quotes when you made the move to My Tomorrows was, "This has to be done." And now I understand why you say that. Yeah. But then I'm curious, after 2 years, you decide to go back into payments.
Yeah.
Why?
Because I figured out that I'm actually more a payments man. So work for My Tomorrows was an enormous amount of fun. But it helps if you are a medical doctor yourself.
Okay.
So we had a lot of medical doctors in our space. So my role was more to sort of create and sort of put the vibe in this company, to move from a pharma company to a pharma tech company. Yeah. And create a little bit more startup spirit and a little bit more entrepreneurial spirit. I think that was done. And for my personal thing, I just missed and loved the payments.
What about payments did you miss and love? Because on the one hand, like if you're talking about medicine, etc., you can think, okay, I'm saving lives, or at least giving people more. Payments, you're helping people transact. I'm just curious, like what about payments?
Yeah, I think it comes with all the ideas that you still have in your head, and you have a network. You know,
you're the specialist as well.
Yeah, you're the specialist as well. So that makes it much easier to sort of set up a company in your field of knowledge. If you have a lot of ideas, if you know where to break the boundaries, then it in reality is for a non-medical person to try to change the medical world. Yeah. And I'm not saying that it wasn't successful at My Tomorrows, but it just didn't grasp me that much. There are people who studied medicine who really got enthusiastic of it. And for me, it was more like, it's an operational job I have to execute. And although it was fun and we really helped a lot of people, and My Tomorrows actually is doing very good still. So, but if your heart is in payments, if you find it out after a couple of years of doing something else, then follow your heart. Yeah. It's another wise lesson for entrepreneurs. Yeah. Follow your heart.
Yeah, nice one. Then actually just continuing with Silverflow. Yeah. Because it took 3 years before go live. Yeah. How do you approach that? Is that something you know up front? How do you go about that?
Yeah, so we knew this up front. Okay. So when we started, we knew we had to build sort of your minimum viable product. Yeah. We knew that product would need to be certified for a lot of different things. So including the certification with Visa, the certification with MasterCard, but also think of security certifications, PCI, audit certifications such as SOC 2. So we knew up front to say we're going to build something and it need to be certified by a lot of different type of organizations. Otherwise, our customers are not even allowed to work with us. Yeah. our banks, they are not allowed to work with a non-compliant product, essentially. Our banks are not allowed, we are not allowed to put customers live on a non-certified product with Visa, MasterCard. And that applies for all those certifications. So we knew that up front, so that's a good thing. It was not a surprise. So how do you go about that? Yeah, with the 3 founders, we essentially said, okay, let's chip in enough money to cover until the first funding round. Initially we said, okay, listen, expect that you pay yourself no salary for the first 3 years. So essentially you pay that in as well.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're paying it to the tax agents. And that money is used for hiring your first staff, your office, your a bit of travel. Well, we couldn't travel that much because COVID started during those years as well. Yeah. You need to have your laptops, but you also need to pay for certification and stuff like that. So we roughly made that calculation, and that's how we started essentially.
And from I think because like the whole idea of Silverflow is like years and years of experience, knowing exactly what are the pain points yourself when you went through everything with almost every company, but also like the Adyen, what you now mentioned predominantly. Mm-hmm. Because within entrepreneurship, I think there's many entrepreneurs building something, and then from time to time wondering like, where the hell is this going?
Yeah.
Should I continue? I don't see any progress. How was that for Silverflow?
Yeah, well, of course, if you're building 3 years without any revenue, sometimes you're scratching your head and say, okay, this is what we're doing. But in all fairness, we at some stage we went to raise some additional money.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do that on the base of at least something, sort of. So certification with one of the schemes and certain basic sets, etc. But we didn't have any customers because customers are not even allowed to sign with you.
That was going to be my question, because sometimes you also see sell before you build or sell while you are building. Yeah. That was not something that you was possible for you specifically.
No, it's not possible. So of course we had our initial conversations, but many of the potential customers that we approached said, well, I like this product, because that's also why we had the conversations. Call me when it's ready.
Okay.
But I'm not going to give any form of commitment because I don't know how it's going to look like when it's finished.
So how was it when it was done? Because that could then still feel like, okay, now we've been building 3 years. Are they really going to now commit or?
Yeah, well, that is essentially when we needed to start the actual sales process and still convincing them that this new product would actually help them. And that's of course, it's a complex thing because they have something which is working, particularly if they already work on a payment facilitator type of contract or if they're a bank. And now we're pitching them something new. And that is quite some convincing. But for me, I was convinced of being in this business for quite long, that there were so many pain points in the system. I was convinced that many of the players in this ecosystem who are remotely familiar or working with these type of products, that everybody's sort of like begging for a new solution.
Yeah.
So we figured out, say, okay, listen, if we get sort of like 2% of those very critical customers towards their current solution, that's already an interesting business case. So we were convinced from day one that this would happen. And of course, this is also the conviction you need to have when you raise money at that stage, because also for your investors, you're raising money on an idea essentially, and not just the idea. You're also raising money on your experience and your network. So that is very important as well, and the vision and let's say your operational experience. How can you pull this off? But you cannot raise money on the fact of revenue or signed customers or any of those commercial metrics.
Yeah, not yet.
Not yet. No, exactly.
Recently, you did.
Yes, well, we've raised about 80 million so far over the last 6 years. So that's split over a few rounds. But the investors, they now have confidence in what we do.
Yeah, I understand. Based on everything we're discussing so far, your story is one of highlights. But I'm also certain there have been moments that you were doubting. And I'm just curious, like, what has been the biggest moment of doubt for you in your career?
Those are usually more the personal stuff, I would say.
Okay.
So business wise, of course, you're doubting as well, but to a degree, you can definitely if you're either managing a company or you founded a company, you have influence in which direction you can go. And there will be things. There will be this big customer that moves away, which we didn't have at Silverflow, by the way, but at other companies. Or there will be the moments that you spend a lot of time and effort to win a big bank, and for whatever reason they still decide not to work with you. But that's also part of life. So it happens. It's not happy. It's not fun. But it comes with doing business. So you sort of calculate that in. Say not everything we do will be successful. There will be staff leaving where you don't want this staff to leave. You might see all those type of things, but it's not unexpected. It's sad at the moment that it happens, but it's not unexpected. But it also takes, it takes also quite a toll on your personal life, essentially. Yeah. So I've been traveling a lot throughout my whole career, essentially. And that does something with your family, with your friends. And on the one side, it's pretty cool because this week you're in New York, and 2 weeks later you're in Singapore, and a month later you're in Sao Paulo, for instance. So it does well on your Instagram, but it doesn't work well for the birthdays that you miss.
No.
So I think that is more has a lot of impact to make the decisions. Am I doing the right thing?
And when did this wisdom become evident for you?
Well, I don't think there's one. Yeah, it's a moving target. So,
but do you now operate differently because you know the downside, or it's still the case you're in a plane every other week?
I'm still flying a lot.
Yeah.
And that's a choice. Huh? So at a certain moment, if things go well with your company, that's not the moment to say I'm gonna relax a little bit. That if customers now, if interesting customers call me and say, "Okay, listen, can you be there tomorrow?" That would be stupid to say, "No, sorry, I want to have a day off tomorrow."
Yeah.
So it's a choice, but it's not really a choice. You've been working for this for a long time, and now you're meeting that customer that you always wanted, and they're inviting you. Yeah, you cannot say no at that moment. I can't.
So there's a kind of a kind of a conflict in a way between the growth and success of your company and the success of your private life in a way.
Yeah, well, I think that you have to make sacrifices or sacrifices. Sorry, you have to make choices, and you can spend your time only once. So if you're building a company, if you want to start up a company, and if you're ambitious, be prepared that a lot of time will go into that company. Also in the evenings, that you have your meetings in the evenings with your team, or with your investors in the US, or that you have to fly a lot, and that's all time that you cannot spend on friends, family, hobbies, etc.
Yeah. Why? What's driving you?
Ambition.
Yeah. Can we unpack that?
No, it's really cool to set up the next generation of companies. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Yeah, but now we are doing like ambition.
No,
but at the other hand, like it is the thing. There is something why you are doing what you're doing with so much dedication and drive.
Yeah, well, I like what I'm doing. So I like to change the playing field. So.
But don't you like to be at home? I'm going to be very direct.
Yeah, well, I do, but my kids are old enough. They're both out of the house anyhow. So they don't rely on me that much anymore. They're good. So that creates a lot of space.
Yeah.
So I bring them with me. So I was at Money 2020, and I bring my youngest daughter with me for a week to Thailand. And this year at Las Vegas, I take my oldest daughter. We're going to drive through a Death Valley and stuff like that. So I combine those things, but because they're both out of the house, that's
quality time.
That's quality time, but it's also during the week, the normal things. They're not reliant on me anymore.
Yeah, because that's another thing with entrepreneurship, right? On the one hand, you have to decide if it's the hard part in terms of, as I say, eating glass and staring into the abyss.
Yep.
And on the other hand, it's also being wired a certain way where you don't always have let's say, it can be lonely at times because people don't understand the way you think. Is that something that you have encountered in your life?
Well, no, not lonely, because you're not alone. Huh? So also at Silverflow, we started with 3 people, and at this moment we're bigger. So we have a management team, and there are a lot of other people that you closely work together with. But it becomes sort of whether you like it or not, they become your friends and your family almost, because you spend so much time with them. So it's very important to select people that you like to hang around with. And also, of course, people who can get the job done, smart people, happy people. But you share a lot of things if you're traveling with your colleagues so much. So I think that is, and that's not, but it's different. If I talk to my other friends and we have discussion, I can explain what I do, but at the same time, for some of them, I don't think they have a clue of what I actually do.
No.
And they understand I'm in payments and they understand that, but they don't really understand what it means to try to set up a global company.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And you can say, it's hard work. Yeah, sometimes hard work. It's also fun.
Yeah, of course. Because otherwise you wouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And what is the fun part? Because I'm not complaining that I worked hard. I spend a lot of hours in my work. That is something else. But if you make those trips, typically you get to see lots of different parts of the world, and you can add if you want 1 or 2 days or whatever if you want to be longer. So you see you meet an enormous amount of very interesting people. Typically, when they take you out to a nice restaurant, or they take you out for a nice place to get some drinks, etc. And that's for me is also part of the job. Is it really working? Well, you can have a debate about it. It is related to work because they're your potential customers and they take you out for dinner. If I wouldn't be there, I would do something different. I would go to the gym or visit my friends or family, etc. So to that degree, it is sort of work. But the combination of, I think, both elements, on the one side, changing the world, changing those boundaries, etc., which is really the hard part of the work, with fantastic colleagues, almost your friends and families, in combination with the travel and all the other people that you meet. That for me is a very interesting combination.
Yeah. I read this book called Essentialism.
Okay.
And one of the things I found really interesting from that book is that many companies and entrepreneurs have a vision, but actually it would be also really interesting to understand. So the vision sets a direction. It can be quite abstract. But what is it when you set a direction and make it very concrete? And if I would translate it to this conversation, what I would be curious to understand is, when is it enough? Like, what is that concrete thing you want to achieve and why?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So we always jokingly say we want to have world dominance but that's more a joke, of course. But there's a little bit of reality in it. So first of all, when you set up a company, I think you do this because you have an idea that what you want to do. And in our case, we want to have the best acquire processing platform.
Yeah.
And then you sort of say, okay, but what does it mean?
Yeah.
The best acquire processing platform. Well, then you try to put some sort of metrics around it. It should be this big or this global, these type of customers.
Sometimes it can feel very empty to just have those numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then so essentially, for me, work is also and for me personally, work is also fun. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So when we founded the company with the 3 of us, we said, okay, one of our measurements is also how much fun we have with the 3.
Yeah.
And not just with the 3, with the whole team.
Yeah.
But that was actually when we started the company. We said, okay, listen, how does success look like?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And of course, you can measure success in the valuation, the turnover, profitability, the size, the number of people, etc. But one of the things that we also concluded about is say, listen, we want to have fun ourselves, but we also want to create a fun environment for our people to work with. And then you get to another question: what does it mean to have a fun company?
What is exactly?
So we said, okay, we want to have a very, we want to work with smart people, with motivated people, with people who speak up. We don't want hierarchy in the organization. We want to address fun things, not just the Friday afternoon drinks, but also do other events with the whole team. So we go skiing, we do wine tasting, lots of that things. But we also want to have a very international team. So if you look at the 100 people that we have, I think we have like 40 or 45 different nationalities and different languages. Also with the purpose, huh? So there's also deeper purpose behind. If we get a customer from the Philippines, we have somebody who can talk to them, who knows the Philippine Manila accent and can say, hey, I'm blah, blah, blah from Silverflow, and it's great that we're talking. I'm actually a developer, but I'm sitting in the commercial call. If there's anything, I'll be there as well to support you. Well, in the Philippines, they speak Spanish, so we have multiple Spanish speakers, but we also have Japanese people or Chinese people or Portuguese or Brazilian or from all over the world. And that creates by itself already a very fun atmosphere. So we want people to, we want to recruit smart people who think with us. Yeah, and then you also should support them in that, in the sense of that if they're just doing their job because I tell them to, then they're not really interested in that. They may be very smart, but they still have to do what I do. So we want the people to come back and come with their own ideas and give them a lot of autonomy from day one, and self-steering, very hip, but we want them to take responsibility for their piece of business and their piece of the organization so that they can grow as well.
Clear.
And that's been a very important part of, let's say, our culture building. What type of culture we want? Well, we want to have a very entrepreneurial culture. What type of people fit in? Very entrepreneurial people who also want to change the boundaries, people who speak up, who say smart things.
Yeah. I had another question on that, but let's go. No, I'm gonna touch upon that later.
That's okay.
Shifting gears a bit. What was the hardest moment in your entrepreneurship?
Well, this is I'm not going to say the company here. It's not Silverflow. It's a company from the past.
But the hardest for you personally?
Yeah, probably that one.
Okay.
I found a big mistake in the financial administration of that company.
Oh.
And it was not my fault per se, but it was under my responsibility. And that is an element that causes a lot of finger pointing. Of course, investors invested on the base that it was a good administration, which turned out not to be a good administration. Accountants pointed at each other because who didn't spot that, why was it there, etc. So that created quite a big can of worm where literally the investors, the management board, but also the operation floor and external accountants, everybody was finger pointing at each other.
Yeah.
And still it needed to be resolved. And that was quite a mess. I also have been at companies where I had to fire people for different reasons. I think firing people is always difficult. But especially if you have a good relation with the people itself, that you say, okay, listen, these are actually my buddies. And still I have to fire them because they're not delivering what they're expected to be delivering. I think that's different. If you don't really have a connection with somebody and it's a big organization and there's somebody new who's just been there 6 weeks and doesn't meet there, then it's a little bit less. But sometimes you also have to take those hard decisions of asking people to leave who have been very instrumental and actually you also consider to be almost friends. I think that those are the hard things.
Actually, because in the beginning you mentioned when you were young, you were a nice guy.
I'm still a nice guy.
You're still a nice guy. But then I can imagine, like, if you by nature are a nice person, a good person, and then also means bonding with people and having fun with colleagues and building those relationships, firing them, how do you then go about that?
Well, it is always difficult to fire people. I don't believe there are any people who say that it's easy to fire people, but it sometimes is needed. And it can be needed because people are not performing. That could be. And it can also be because people by itself are performing but are not fitting in anymore. So they don't have the right motivation anymore, or they... And how do you go about it? Normally, if they're your buddies, you spend a little bit more time on them. So you sort of say, okay, this is going to happen. Maybe it's time that either you do something different or I have to do it, but take your own choices. So you're sort of asking them to leave themselves. But that sometimes doesn't work. Huh? And then you still have to make the hard decisions. And you do that for the best of the company. It's not the best for your personal relation, but it could be the best for the company.
Yeah. Have you ever fired somebody that then afterwards also that personal relationship was broken, or is it always then still fine afterwards?
It depends, I think, how you do it. So no, it both happens. So with some of them I still have a very good relation, and some of them I don't speak that often. But it's the trouble if in payment business everybody still somehow have to work with each other, but it's not that they always remain good buddies. No.
The hardest moment was this financial.
I think that it was a very hard moment. Yeah.
What did you take from that? What do you learn from that moment?
Well, that you can also get finger pointed for things that you didn't do, but you are responsible for it. So yeah, what did I learn from it? I think that's if you see these problems and you know that they're serious, that there's no, you know that you will open a can of worms essentially, but you still have to do it, because if you don't do it, then you spotted it and you didn't do anything. But as a CEO, you have to do those type of things. You cannot sort of close the can. Oh, there's too many worms. Let's kick the can down the road and let somebody else solve it. But that's also what I did. But I also learned from it that it can cause a lot of things.
Yeah. Growth.
Yeah. That's a better topic.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. At the moment, you're growing 10 to 15% month over month.
Yes.
What growth strategy has been essential for that success?
Well, I think that in our case, the customers that we onboard, so payment service providers and banks, typically once they go live with us, they do not open the switch or toggle the switch and that we get 100% of their volume. So typically the first months you get a little bit of their volume because they want to test if all the functionality works, but also if all the operational processes work, etc. Then they give you a little bit more volume, sometimes in spikes to test if your platform also works under stress, etc. So with every customer, we have agreed on sort of ramp-up process.
Yeah, or fractional migration or something.
Fractional migration. So we can predict that pretty well. But of course, if you have many customers who are starting at a different time, you can stack sort of all those projections or agreed ramp-up processes on each other. And that's where you get this growth, and that's how you can predict it going forward.
We're almost coming to a close, but before we do, you have a vision. Actually, you have a dream headline. And the dream headline is 5% global market share or $1 trillion processed. Yeah. Do you have the differentiators to make it happen, or do you need to build that still?
No, I think that, to be quite honest, of course, we're investing heavily in technology because we still have many ideas. But I think that with the tools that we have today already, it's more a sales game, win those customers, rather than a technology game. So I think that's on the technology side we're pretty covered. And I'm saying that, but we have still many ideas. But I mean, we're selling our business to the largest banks across the globe. Yeah, this is a numbers game. So more banks, more transactions. So we could get there with the product that we have today.
And the team? Why this team? Why is this team capable of doing it?
Well, I think this team is capable, and then I'm particularly looking at myself then, not at all the other people, this founding team. That's always a question you have to ask yourself. I think that we have a very good team at this moment, but it does take different people to manage a company from 0 to, let's say, 0 to 1. That's nice in the book to sort of have a real company established. And it does take different people to move it from 1 to 10, and it could take different people to move from 10 to 100. Yeah. And then I'm particularly looking at sort of the managing, the directors, because that's usually where the differences make. They just decide and they set the type of culture. I think that with the team that we currently have, we have the experience at least to bring the company to a certain size. And if at a certain moment we see that we don't have enough, we don't grow enough, we don't have enough capacity in our own team, I think that would be the moment to sort of say, okay, should we bring in external people who can do this role? But that's not something that we're discussing today. So it's not a topic. No. For a long while, I think that we actually have quite a good team at this moment. But you should always look at, am I adding more to this company in this role than somebody else could? Yeah, if there's somebody who could do my job better, then it would be ego for me to stay. And
is that something, because sometimes it's difficult to see that yourselves, that that the three of you hold each other very accountable on that, or like there's a mirror, or how do you make sure that you stay honest?
Well, I think that's also discussion you have with your supervisory board, with your shareholders, etc. So you get that feedback. If we're not growing fast enough, or if we're making the wrong strategic decisions, or if we make the right strategic decisions, of course we have our external shareholders as well. We have a supervisory board, and they should be sort of the reasonably neutral ones in benchmarking us against other companies that they see, against other managers, leaders that they see in the market, So yes, of course, we trigger each other, for sure. You should do that. You challenge each other. But I think that the real proof point is about all the others, whether it's the shareholders, the representatives, the supervisory board members, etc. At the moment, at a certain moment, say, Robert, you're missing the boat a little bit more often.
Yeah, and it happens.
Then that should be a trigger for me to say, okay, I'm a really right person for the job. But that, so far, keep our fingers crossed, hasn't happened yet. I think they're all pretty satisfied with what we're doing.
Super. Then final part, 3 questions. To round off. It's called Think, Build, Live. So the first one is think. Which book, framework, or experience has fundamentally changed the way you think?
I read a lot of books about physics and mathematics.
Okay.
So I also read a lot of biographies, but I think that the ones that excite me are about improbability science. So things that are very rare to happen and still happen.
Yeah.
And those are books that inspire me a lot. I mean, they're mathematical books, so most people will find them very boring. But there's a large, or it's a small segment, I should say, which has to do with improbability.
But like, what's something that you take from that
Well, that things sometimes look unlikely to happen, but they still happen. Sometimes you have in the news and say, okay, this happened. The chance of this happening is very small. Yeah, but you read it in the news, so it's happening. So I sort of get inspired by all the ideas that they have there and the examples of making impossible things happen. And what usually is the case, if this impossible thing happens, somewhere down the line, one of the elements was not estimated correctly. One of the things that decide or determine the chance of something to happen was either calculated incorrectly, or it was calculated incorrectly if this and that happen.
So actually, this also helps you and motivates you to do the impossible in a way.
Yeah, it helps me to understand that some things are very hard. Yeah, sure. Are they impossible? Well, there are also certain things that are impossible. That's so. But it gives me another perspective on things that are really hard or perceived to be really hard.
Ah, okay.
How hard is it really? And then try to find out, why is it so hard? Which element of this particular thing you want to achieve is so hard? And try to find out to make that particular element simpler. Because usually it's hard because of a lot of different factors.
Yeah, but now you break it down into smaller chunks and then figure out where you can...
Which is the hardest part.
Yeah.
And this is to a degree... Go back to the study. If you study something theoretical, whether it's mathematics or physics or geophysics, etc., quite often you learn to see the world as a puzzle.
Yeah,
and you try to put it back in smaller pieces of the puzzle so that you can build on your theory, etc.
Nice. So, what's the name of the book that you would recommend?
Yeah, I don't know the name now, but
okay,
I've got the library with those type of books.
Second question. Second question. Build. Which tool would you recommend to everyone?
Wow, that's a long silence. I think in the communications apps, I think communication is very important to work with your coworkers, to work with your founders, to work with the investors, and we use Slack a lot as an internal communication tool. But it's not necessarily that particular tool. I think that communication in general is a very important tool.
But to your point, like I used to work at a company that used Slack, and then I went to a company that used, I don't know, something in Google, but it was very fragmented.
Yeah.
and you didn't have like these, I don't know what they call it, but like these different groups within Slack where you can easily communicate. And you know exactly I need to navigate there. Yeah. Made such a difference for the culture in the company.
Absolutely.
Crazy.
Yeah. So that's a tool if you look at the tool, but I think in general have a good communication tool. I think communication for and that applies for your business, but it applies for a lot of things. Make sure that that communication is important as the tool is important. Slack is recommending Slack.
Final question. Liv, which habit, ritual, or choice has the most positive impact on you?
I love to go to gym, so I really need that. I love to run as well, although I have a little feet injury. But that clears up my mind. So then you're just sporting and
in practice, does that mean a certain amount of times a week, a certain moment of the day? How do you?
Yeah. So I typically train 3 times a week, and once in the morning and a few times in the evening. If I'm traveling, I try to do that as well, although that's slightly different in the hotels. But I think those moments are for me sort of like my clearing moments. And have fun outside as well. Do stuff outside of work as well. So I like to go to festivals and music and
Any particular music? Or festival?
Well, I play guitar myself, so if I go to a concert, I'd love it if there's a little bit of guitar in it. If you go to the festivals, it's more like the dance festivals here, but do fun stuff as well.
Good one. Robert, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.